So Dan Borges is here, and he's got a book, Adversarial Tradecraft in Cybersecurity, which I happen to know you're pretty good at. So tell us about this.
Yeah, so the book actually came about after doing the CCDC Red Team and the Pros versus Joe stuff after many years. I just felt like there wasn't this other half of the learning process, which is like the feedback of here's the techniques we're doing, here's how you detect them. It just felt like every year we were kind of just beating the students over the head with the same techniques over and over again, and there wasn't this like full cycle. So yeah, the book, Adversarial Tradecraft and Cybersecurity, it starts with some high level theory, just some things that I think are like kind of important for these operations. Uh, it's things that are like that I think are both like common sense, but then are also like a little bit counterintuitive to traditional like infosec advice. Like one of them is the principle of deception. And in like a lot of traditional infosec engineering, you always hear like, oh, you don't want security through obscurity. You don't want to rely on deception. But when you're actually in a conflict with another person, applying deception to your operations, like, just tricky file names blending in, helps tremendously. So like focusing on that and actually trying to hone that skill is important, I think.
Yeah, it makes sense. It also makes for a lot of fun tricks. I know Caitlin used it successfully in those competitions. I know a couple times people thought they were hacking Caitlin and they're just hacking into her honeypot. So that's...
Yeah, like Caitlin was on the national CCDC Red Team with us this year, and you did the Mac Finder trick, which was really funny.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
What's that?
So I took a 6502. 6800 emulator, and I threw it on a bunch of Windows machines, replacing Explorer with Mac OS 8 or 7.
So it looked like a Mac, but it was really a PC.
No, it turned the PC into a Mac. So you would log in, and then you would get the Mac desktop with beta versions of Photoshop.
Yeah,
it was pretty great. So it's just like a, and that would never show up in a traditional Red Team type test, but it's those types of deceptions or like understanding what computing environment are you really in, or like putting people in a different environment. Like that's a fun example, right? But that's what like in a more malicious sense a rootkit would do. It would change the way you perceive your computing environment.
Yeah, and you had some ideas how to use this against ransomware before we started. Those sound worth mentioning.
Yeah. It's so when you start thinking of like tricks like this, one of the things that I talk about is the principle of time, which is a lot of computer science you need to automate to get this like speed to keep up with certain things. But when you automate stuff, you make it rigid and you make like a set type of a process, and that process can be figured out by a human and then like outsmarted and tricked. So one of the ideas with ransomware is if it's sitting there and enumerating all of your drives and then going through all the files in the drive sequentially and encrypting them, you can place like honey files, like basically honey pots, but they're files that get alerted on when either their contents is read or the name of the file is read. So you place these honey files all over the system, and they can have trigger actions. So like this is a file nobody should ever see, nobody should ever touch, right? And if they're opening it, and depending on your sensors or your EDR or whatever you have, if they're like running crypto functions or all these other features you could, add to your detection logic. But if they're opening these files that nobody should ever touch, you could do a reaction like shut down the machine, start your forensic process, right? And that would stop, your important files from getting encrypted and then trigger your incident response process.
Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And it's kind of what I've been hoping for, some kind of maybe something you could turn into a commercial product and sell people that would actually stop ransomware. And it's because, everybody needs a cure and nobody has a simple cure.
Yeah. And there's a theme throughout the book, which is another one of these principles that I try to highlight, which is the principle of innovation. And so easy, it's so easy, and sometimes from my perspective, to change the game like that, right? When something's set in stone, like malware, ransomware, you can innovate on it and you can write a detection or write a tool and automate existing technologies. And I feel like a lot of times, not so much the students, I feel like the students do innovate a lot nowadays, but like I feel like people just get stuck in their ways, you know what I mean, where they're like, I need a product or I need a solution to help me do this, and like with computers, like we just forget how easy it is to innovate, right? Like to just write a program and tie two tools together. So that's like an overall arching theme throughout the book, is like yeah, here's tools that can solve your job for you now today with this specific problem, but don't be afraid to innovate. Don't be afraid to go out there and write your own tools or dig into the tools you're using and figure out how they work and just tweak them a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. But I think that's when you have relatively advanced staff. I mean, most like small to medium business, they're pretty much stuck with off the shelf stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I talk about too, is just like when you're building out your team, like for a competition like CCDC, right? You need the most important thing you can build out is expertise, right? Having the right talent on your team and people to take on the right projects. And then I also talk about like you want this expertise or talent to own all the projects on your team. And then it's really important not to take on too many projects. Like you can't overburden your team. You got to let these people have room to work within their lanes.
Yes, this is, I think, a huge issue. I find the sort of square corporate managers are always want everything done on a deadline, and the creative people need to be treated more like artists, where they have some flexibility. And one of my hacker type friends always keeps saying you're trying too hard, because you have to like not be under pressure and pushing. You have to be like a kid playing to really do good work in this creative area, and that is perennially hard for the deadline oriented suit guys to get.
Yeah, I really like that. Like when I was writing the book, I was constantly under these deadlines and these, you have to meet all of these publisher deadlines and get everything done by a certain time. And I had read this really great quote by Seth Rogen, I think it was, who just wrote Your Book, which is a book, he wrote. And he was like, nobody's ever reading a book and they're like, oh, I bet this made all the deadlines. I bet this chapter got in on time, right? Like,
Yeah.
no, they're looking at the content and the quality of the content.
I remember an interview with Bill Gates about 20 years ago when he was the CEO of Microsoft. And he said, why is your product always like 6 or 9 months late? And he said, well, we're working on it. And then the engineers say, well, this is not ready yet and we need more time. And so we have to push it out. And he said, and this makes sense to you because no other CEO talks like this. What? I mean, everybody else, you plan the marketing campaign, you plan the discounts, you have planned a launch date, and therefore ready or not, it's shipping. And, that's not really, I mean, there's two sides to that. And Bill Gates was on the other side, perfectly happy to make everything 9 months late.
Yeah.
Well,
I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, Bill Gates also kind of knew his craft. I mean, a lot of these tech CEOs really aren't that technical, like, Steve Jobs. But I mean, Bill Gates knew how to code. He knew how deadlines work when coding, as in there are no deadlines. It's done when it's done.
And somehow, I want to say the logical consequence is that Windows is wonderful and Apple makes junk, but I can't really say that, somehow that isn't how it turned out.